I'm Sarah Munoz, and I'm here to explain Arizona's language development approach. So, starting with the terminology, how does Arizona describe or define a English language learner or an EL or an ELL? An English language learner to the state of Arizona is a student that has not proficiently spoken English or does not yet have the ability to proficiently speak English, according to the AZELA or the Arizona English Language Learner Assessment. So, some distinctions between the ESL, bilingual, sheltered English instruction, and structured English immersion models, because those are those that come into play, and Arizona does use all of those models. So, beginning with bilingual programs, these aim to teach students, like all students that are in the class, one more language, and they rely on kind of having a specific ratio of both languages present in the classroom in each student. So when there's two prominent languages spoken within the school district, that works best. And when you can get that ratio mixed in well with that class, you can get them to equally use both languages in the classroom, ultimately leading to both of the languages becoming bilingual in all of the students. When we talk about sheltered English immersion, this method is kind of more of providing a linguistic refuge for students who are still learning the language. So they're still learning content, they're still learning standards, but the instruction is supported with visuals and modified assignments and more comprehensible vocabulary for somebody at that level who is still learning the language. And then when we talk about oh my goodness, structured English immersion, this is talking about scheduling and set amounts of hours that help students get that exposure to the new language, typically English. And it can be a very fast way to get students immersed in English. They tend to learn faster this way. And a cool part about structured English immersion is the fact that it is being guided by teachers, so they're hopefully not going to lose all of their own native language. It's still being factored in, and so they get that certain amount of day of hours of exposure. I'll move on to talking about Arizona's language development approach, and like there's four principles about it. The first, I believe, well, we'll start talking about it as a whole. It uses the elements of explicit language instruction, um, real world, like cultural assets, like asset based views, um, integrating their content standards with the language standards, and then monitoring assessments and feedback and putting the scores and using those and implementing them to improve the instruction. At the core of this whole approach is the shared responsibility of all educators to get their English students to succeed. And that kind of falls on the responsibility of all the educators. So it's not just one person, it's not just one group. This is kind of viewed as a whole responsibility, and this is the ultimate goal. So when we talk about student agency is a big part, and it's one of the ultimate goals of this whole approach. When we talk about student agency, basically what that means is the independence or autonomy that students gain when they have a say in the classroom. So when a teacher hears a question and they let students roll with it and they guide the discussion and they let them speak about their interests, that's kind of leading to student agency. This is when students can, they use the knowledge of themselves, they use the knowledge of their community, and they also show like the resources that they know. It's rooted in their beliefs, their experiences, and how they understand themselves. And so they use all of that and they make impacts on their community, on their classroom, and they enrich their own instruction when they get the chance to delve into their own interests and use their own resources that can be accessed from school, with the support, of course, of a teacher or educators. And then delving back into the approach specifically, there's those four elements that I spoke about. Asset based behaviors and expectations. So that's when teachers and educators look at students' culture and their resources, their family, their community, and use those as resources that can be enriching to the classroom and can help improve what they know and can be used to reinforce instruction. Integrated instruction and disciplinary language and content. So this is that commitment that we spoke about of educators bringing in the language standards into the content standards, and all of them must analyze the standards and see how can they put those together best to improve the language instruction as well as get the content across in the best way possible. Targeted and explicit language instruction. So that's just making sure that students know we're not teaching them language subliminally. We're not teaching it on the sideline. They get the tactics, they get the strategies to learn that language, and they know when they're being taught English. They know when they're being given those techniques, and it makes it easier than just absorbing by exposure because they're guided and they're given those strategies that they can use as tools to further their English proficiency. And then when we talk about the last element, assessments, monitoring, and feedback, this is when schools or teachers or educators use assessments. They analyze and evaluate how a student is doing. They gain that content, and what they're supposed to do with it is organize it and then implement it and inform about it. So when a student does good, when they improve, when they have a strength, when they have a weakness, they should know about it. So they should be told, as well as their stakeholders and their support team should all know about how the student's doing, what they're doing great with, what they're not doing so great with, what they need help with. And on the educator's end, they should be looking at those things too. What did we do well? What do we need more help on? What can I do? What strategies should I put into my instruction to improve and get past those struggles and improve my student further? And then we'll talk about the models that Arizona uses right now. The first one being the newcomer model, where the school day is split into 3 sections, each being about 2 hours. The first is targeted instruction. This one has just ELLs as their peers. The second section is another 2 hours of integrated instruction. Again, just ELLs as the classmates there. And then the last section is a mix of ELLs and non-ELLs. And that is 2 hours of the day just taught in English. And then the pull-out model is also broken into 3 sections, but they're a little bit different. The first is targeted instruction again, but this one only lasts about an hour, 50 minutes to an hour a day, just ELLs in there. The next segment is going to be a mix of ELLs and non-ELLs for another hour, and this is that integrated instruction. The rest of the day is going to be taught in just English, and that is the mix of ELLs and non-ELLs. So that was the pull-out model, and then we're going to move on to the 2-hour model, which is 2 hours at the beginning of the day dedicated to just targeted instruction with just ELLs. The second section is going to be taught in English, but one of those class periods needs, at a minimum of one of those class periods, needs to be for integrated instruction, and that's going to have the mix of ELLs and non-ELLs. The last model that they use is the 50-50 dual language immersion model, which requires a bilingual parental waiver, so it's a little bit different from the others. And this one splits the day into 2 main sections, the first section being focused on English instruction, and it has 3 subsections within it. So the first of those subsections is going to be about 25 to 30 minutes of targeted instruction with just ELLs. The next subsection is 75 to 90 minutes, so about an hour and a half of integrated instruction. Again, peers are going to be mixed ELL and non-ELL. And then the last subsection is English instruction just taught in English, mix of students there. And then that second section of the day is taught in English all, but, and again, mix of peers, so non-ELLs and ELLs, and it focuses on partner language instruction. So that's how those 2 big sections differ. Those are the rundown of the models, and that's all I've got for the language development in Arizona.